Welcome to the Beat podcast. This is MJ here with BD. This is part 2 of the inaugural podcast of the Beat. So technically, I guess it's not the inaugural podcast anymore. And we continue our discussion of the top 10 franchises in NBA history.
So the number 4 franchise, I'll let MJ do this one since this is his favorite team all time.
So yeah, my all-time favorite franchise is the Chicago Bulls. They totaled 10,496 points. They have 6 championships, 6 finals appearances, 33 playoff appearances, and 2,023 regular season games won.
And they have a winning all-time record in the regular season. So that's another big thing for them. And that was, I think, what separated them a little bit from New York, on top of course, winning more championships.
Yeah, I mean, Chicago is a team that, even though they played in the big city, they really were not anything great before the Michael Jordan era. I mean, Michael Jordan's the greatest player of all time, and he really just turned that franchise around. Now they're one of the biggest franchises of all time, and what's really amazing is they won all 6 of their championships in the 90s, and they, all with Michael Jordan, of course, it makes them 3rd overall in championships.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
Right, definitely. And they're perfect in the finals. Nobody on our list, we'll finish the next ones too, but no one on the list has been perfect in the finals after they've won multiple championships.
And since Michael Jordan retired, they've had some great players. They've had Tyson Chandler and Ron Artest. They've had a lot of good players before they really became great players in the NBA. They've had the Derrick Rose era, and we'll see how that goes. But now they've got Jimmy Butler and Paul Gasol and look really good.
Derrick Rose is one of those guys like...
yeah, he's like a Grant Hill or a Penny Hardaway.
Like a Grant Hill, I forgot his name for a second there, right? Who just injury has kind of hurt his career because, and he's still a great player, and we'll see, it's not over, but yeah, like Derrick Rose has definitely, if he hadn't been injured, who knows, maybe they would have had a championship by now or been closer to getting a championship than they have so far.
I sort of agree with what Charles Barkley says recently, which is basically that Derrick Rose is not the same player he once was. And it's not a knock at Derrick Rose, but when he does come back, he needs to be more of I don't want to say a facilitator, but when you have Pau Gasol and Jimmy Butler, he's not the whole team anymore. And that team, it would really hurt that identity of that team if he just tried to come back and do that. His role on that team is going to evolve because it would be really unwise for Chicago to continue to invest solely in him when there's so much other talent on that team.
I think what we also used as far as intangibles go for Chicago is, getting to, as a Bulls fan, right, being part of that Jordan Pippen era, winning 3 in a row, and then another 3 in a row after Jordan came back, the 72-win season, getting to watch those two guys, and also all the amazing dunks, and getting to watch that day in and day out. And part of the intangibles gave them pretty much full credit because if there was any one individual player you'd want to watch on a nightly basis, I don't see anybody that you'd want to put over ahead of Jordan. Also, one of the, again, few franchises to be able to not just win 2 in a row, but win 3 in a row, do it on multiple occasions. We had to give them full points for repeating. I think them and the top 2 franchises we'll get to are really in a class of their own when it comes to that. So that definitely helped put them above everyone else on our list other than this next team we'll talk about.
Yeah, I mean, the Chicago Bulls in the 90s, they were the NBA.
Right.
You would just see people, I think the 90s was a special time for the NBA in general, but you would see people everywhere with Bulls jerseys on. It didn't matter where you were.
Well, I mean, Jordan globalized, like where in the 80s, kind of, the Lakers-Celtics rivalry, right, with Bird and Magic kind of saved them and made them really popular.
Yeah.
Jordan globalized the game in the 90s, right, because everybody around the world, liked him, liked the Bulls, was a fan of them, and he made the NBA a lot more popular in other countries, not just here.
Yeah, Michael Jordan, you don't really see that as much in athletes anymore, but he was just such a professional, as Phil Jackson would probably say. He didn't do a lot of big ego boosts after big plays. I mean, this guy is doing the best plays you ever seen, but he doesn't have to celebrate after every play because his game spoke for itself, and he was just such on another level. Surprisingly, unlike players of today, they actually doubted Michael Jordan many times. And he always proved his doubters wrong, whether it was they said he wasn't good enough on defense, or he couldn't shoot threes, or he couldn't win championships. I mean, he pretty much proved everybody wrong on every occasion.
Yeah, I think what separated him a little bit and what makes Kobe very similar to Michael is that those guys used that to fuel them as motivation, and nobody did it better than him.
And that's something I really like about Michael Jordan per se is, and just in people in general, is a lot of people, they get criticized and they complain about it and they point fingers. Michael Jordan, if he could turn a negative into a positive, he would, and he always tried to prove his critics wrong. There's actually a funny play, I think it was against the Jazz, but he dunked on a guy, I think it was John Stockton, and somebody in the fans, shouted at him and says, Can't you dunk on anybody taller?
Pick on someone your own size.
That's what it was.
Something like that.
And he dunked on the tallest guy on the team. He's like a 7-footer.
Big enough for you?
And that was just his competitive spirit and who he was. And the reason we're talking so much about him is because, I mean, he was the Bulls,
Sure.
So.
Sure. Yeah, and that was like MJ said earlier. I mean, him and Pippen and Rodman and Kerr, other guys like that, but mostly, obviously, most of the credit goes to him since he was the best player, was able to propel a team like that with no championships to the third most all time and put them, at least on our list, but I think on most people's list, in the top 5, maybe even in the top 3 or 4 all-time franchises. On our list, him and Pippen were able to take them to number 4 on our list, but the next team did a little bit better. And it was actually pretty close. It was within 500 points, which for our list was pretty close. So number 3 franchise there's the Philadelphia 76ers. They had 10,946 points, pretty close to the Bulls. They had, of course, 3 championships, 9 finals appearances, which is third most all time in the NBA, but 47 playoff appearances, which is also, I think, third most all time in the NBA, 2,698 regular season wins. Also, by our numbers, third most in the NBA. And that's really what kind of propelled them, is they've been around a lot longer than Chicago has when it comes in the NBA, and just their success they had success pretty kind of recently, right? Early 2000s with Iverson, when they made it to the finals and they were competitive. But they've always really, one of those franchises that have always been successful and good in pretty much any decade you look at. They've had, stretches where they were, competitive and had a chance to win a championship, or at least be competitive for one. And they're also definitely well above the 500 mark for all-time regular season wins. Yeah, 9 finals appearances is amazing.
Definitely.
So they've had a lot of legendary players, which MJ can talk about that more.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the 76ers, it's just one of those classic franchises. They've had Moses Malone, they've had Allen Iverson more recently, Dr. J, of course, probably be the most famous. They've definitely had their rough times. Like recently, they're not very good, even though they have a really good coach. I mean, it's just, I think we both wanted the Bulls to be third, but 76ers is a team you can live with.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we both like the Bulls more, but like we said earlier, we try to be as objective as possible. And yeah, I mean, you can't say anything against Philly. As far as intangibles go, their long storied, success, they have a lot of history there. The city, even though we're not from there, but from what we could tell, the city really loves their team, not just the 76ers, but all their other sports franchises. And part of that, the intangibles, for them, because their fans appreciate them, they like their team, they want them to succeed, kind of like Oklahoma City fans, they really like their team. It's not like where, when LeBron was on the Heat, a lot of people would say, a lot of those were fake fans. They were just there because they were good. And I think Philadelphia fans, Oklahoma City fans, they legitimately like their team a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think Charles Barkley said something like that, and he gets booed every time he goes to the Heat.
I'm sure there are a lot of, actual, real, hardcore Heat fans that have liked them before that and still do. But I think Philly fans are some of the most hardcore in liking their team.
When I think of the Philadelphia 76ers, it's them announcing Julius Erving's name and him jumping from the free throw line and doing the famous dunk that Michael Jordan actually emulated to win his dunk championships, which people might not know. I mean, they just have such a great spot in NBA history.
Mm-hmm.
And Julius Erving was their face. One of his most famous plays, it looked like he was jumping out of bounds, and he somehow swinged on the other side of the rim and made a layup.
Right.
But it's hard not to think of the Sixers when you think of NBA history.
Definitely, and that's what helped put them in the top three, was just the continued success. But that doesn't help them compared to this next team, who's had way more of it, especially when it comes to finals and championships.
Well, I'll take this one because obviously BD has some holdings with the Lakers, if you will. But Boston Celtics is number 2. I'm sure you all figured that out. 17,316 total points.
And I think that's just an amazing number. When you look at all the other ones, really have been within 2,000 to 3,000 points of each other.
Yeah.
But I mean, in the NBA, really, this team has separated themselves away from pretty much everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, they're just amazing.
Yeah.
17 championships, 21 finals appearances, 51 playoff appearances, and 3,133 regular season games won.
Yeah, it's amazing that team has always, been good. I mean, they've had in the last, maybe decade or so, they've had a stretch where they haven't been. I mean, obviously in 2008 they beat the Lakers and they won their 17th championship, but they've had some stretches recently where they haven't been the dominant team. But yeah, they early on, right? I mean, only team to win 8 championships in a row. Not just, I think, in the NBA, but really any other major sport.
Yeah.
North American major sport.
I mean, you're talking about a team that has arguably the best player of all time in Bill Russell, arguably the best coach of all time in Red Auerbach.
Sure.
Some of the most underrated players would be the guys that played with Bill Russell, like Bob Cousy and them.
We're Hall of Famers.
They're Hall of Famers. Yeah, they are appreciated. They just get a little
overlooked because of Bill Russell.
They're appreciated, but they just get a little bit overlooked. I mean, they've just had such a great history. Larry Bird in the 80s, Antoine Walker and Paul Pierce in the early 2000s, and then Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Ray Allen in the later 2000s. They've had some really good teams.
Definitely. Yeah, and I mean, obviously, Celtics, one of the 2 franchises to have over 3,000 wins, right? Well above 500 mark in regular season games won. One of only 2 franchises to win have over 50 playoff appearances. One of only 2 franchises to make it to the finals, right? Over 20 times, and one of only 2 franchises to win over 10 championships, right? I mean, amazing. Yeah. This team has separated themselves from the pack by a long shot.
Yeah, it's just such a historic franchise.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things we took into account with the intangibles. Of course, they got, for repeats, they won 8 in a row, 11 in 13 years. So, yeah, for the repeats and dominance, they get full points for that. I mean, when you win 8 in a row, it doesn't get any more dominant than that. And then part there, I think one of the cities also kind of like Philadelphia, where they have a deep tradition. The fans there are very loyal. They love their team. They'll support them no matter what.
It's worth noting that when Bill Russell played for the Boston Celtics, he dealt with a lot of racism. and he's always been a social advocate and carried himself in a very classy manner.
Yep.
And if there's one guy who really deserves a statue, he would be it. So
Definitely.
Boston needs to do the right thing, hopefully while Bill Russell is still alive, and give him a statue.
Sure. Yeah, I think the NBA did really well back in 2010 when they made the Finals MVP trophy, named after
That was
him.
really cool.
Yeah, that was definitely good. So, yeah, I mean, this franchise been more successful really than anybody other than the next one, which I'm sure everyone now already knows which one it is.
I don't even have to talk on this one.
Yeah, the only other franchise that has had more success than the Celtics has been, number one, the Los Angeles Lakers. And point-wise, when we did our point system, they're the only ones that have 18,694 points. And the only category where they do a little bit not as good in is the number of championships, and it's only one less. So they have 16 championships, but an amazing 31 finals appearances. Only franchise to make it to the playoffs 60 times. And they were also the first franchise to win over 3,000 games. They're also the winningest franchise ever, both in the playoffs and in the regular season. They have 3,197 regular season games won. Other than the two things, I guess, that Boston has where you can make the argument, because you can definitely make the argument that Boston's number one, but I think where, and the two things you can always use are, we have one more championship, and they've beaten the Lakers more times in the finals than the Lakers have beaten them. But Lakers have had more success against Boston, recently. The last few times they've met in the finals. So in the modern era, the Lakers have been able to have more success against the Celtics when they've played against each other. But yeah, I mean, this team's kind of been, in a way, if you think about it, they've won their championships in an opposite way. Boston won 11 of their 17 titles, kind of, before 1970.
Yeah.
Whereas the Lakers, they were also the first dynasty. They won 5 out of 6 championships back in the, I guess, 40s, 50s. Mm-hmm. So for a while, they had the most championships. They were
Minneapolis Lakers.
Back when they were in Minneapolis, yeah.
So for those of you who are wondered why they're the Lakers, it's because they were actually in a place that had lakes.
Yeah, the land of lakes, right, Minneapolis. So that's why they're called that. Yeah, but they definitely went a completely different route. They won the first. I don't know if they won the exact 5 out of 6 first titles. I think there was a team that won before them, like the official first NBA championship, but they were the first, dynasty first, with George Mikan, where he was able to lead them to that, which is a pretty big, accomplishment right off the bat. And then really they've been successful in pretty much every decade. Even in the 90s, they didn't win any championships, but in 91, right, Magic Johnson and the Lakers played against the Bulls when the Bulls won their first championship. But yeah, in pretty much every decade they've had success and they've won. 31 finals appearances. I think back when they won their last championship in 2010, I think the NBA was 60 or 61, something like that, years.
Yeah.
And basically, so then at that point, the Lakers were in the finals 50% of the time, which is unprecedented for any team, really, to have that much success. And I guess at that point, right, you could say they had a quarter of the titles, right, pretty much.
It's pretty insane.
Yeah, and then, of course, there's another, I think, interesting topic that we could talk about was when you look at Lakers versus Celtics. Celtics won, like we said, most of their titles before the 70s. Lakers had won most of theirs, 11 of them, I think, since the 70s. Mm-hmm. So, some people would say, well, it means more to win in the modern era. And there are good, I've heard a lot of good arguments for in both camps that, even those, sometimes, those back in the 50s and 60s would mean just as much. And that's a pretty interesting topic we could discuss, maybe hopefully over the summer when there aren't as many things going on in the NBA.
Yeah.
As far as intangibles go, obviously, pretty much being the most dominant franchise, winningest franchise, being in the final. If you're a Lakers fan, you're very spoiled basically because your team's almost always good.
Well, until Bus's son took over.
Yeah, well, and that's the interesting thing though. This is the first time ever I think that they've missed the playoffs 2 years in a row. I'm not 100% sure about that.
I think they had the worst record in franchise history.
This year, that's how long it took them, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So that's why Lakers really are in the NBA the most spoiled fans because you're always used to them winning. And if you win, if you're in the finals 31 times out of, what is the NBA, 64, 65 years now since it's been around?
He's getting up there.
I mean, it's pretty close to almost half the time. So, and then of course we wanted to mention some of the great players for the Lakers.
I mean, it's just, you watch the NBA to see the stars, the best players in basketball, and that's what you get with the Los Angeles Lakers. I mean, it's just they are the NBA All-Star team. There's a few notable absences, but I mean, every era, George Mikan was dominant. They had Wilt Chamberlain and Jerry West at one point. Magic Johnson. They had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaq,
and
Kobe.
Pau Gasol.
Pau Gasol. And they also had the guy who was Dr. J before Dr. J, the original innovator of the dunk in the NBA, Elgin Baylor.
Right, yeah. I would forget him. And that's the thing with the Lakers. It's easy to forget guys. And some of these guys, though, since there's so many of them, like the Lakers, who would be a starter on any other franchise, wouldn't even be a starter on the Lakers. Like Elgin Baylor, probably in most Lakers fans, if you put a list of top, the starters, he might not even be on there for a lot of people. So yeah, that's the other thing with the Lakers. So when we talked about the intangibles for them, of course they had an all-time winning record. Now getting to play in LA. One of the greatest cities in the world, Hollywood, getting to see celebrities, every night. And, of course, an onslaught of not just Hollywood stars, but NBA players.
Yeah.
The repeats, I mean, they're also one of the few franchises that have been able to not just win 2 in a row, which they've also been able to do on multiple occasions, but they've also had multiple three-peats when they were in Minneapolis, and then again with Shaq and Kobe. And then they had a repeat with Kareem and Magic in the 80s, also when they were in Minneapolis, because they won 5 out of 6. They won 2 in a row, and then 3 in a row, and then 2. I can't remember, but really, they won 5 out of 6.
They won a lot.
So somewhere in there, they had a repeat and a three-peat. So one of the few teams to be able to do that. So we had to give them full points there as well.
I mean, they're just so amazing from a franchise perspective.
Right.
They've done everything a franchise should do and more, and Jack Nicholson loves them.
yeah, right. How can you argue with Jack?
And you do not argue with Jack Nicholson.
Right. And I think that ends the discussion of the top 10 franchises. I did mention before we started our list, I wanted to talk about a little bit who we liked instead of the teams. Obviously, Atlanta, we never thought they would be in the top 10. My number 1, obviously, the Lakers. Number 2 was Boston. 3 for me would be Bulls. 4, the Spurs, because I like to put more emphasis on winning the championships. But one of the things I think we learned looking at this, you have to look at playoffs, regular season wins, longevity of the franchise as well. And then I guess after that, Detroit, Philly, New York, the Warriors, to kind of round out the list. And then after that, Houston. Yeah. For me, Miami, I would put them, as number 10 because of their success, being able to win, make it to the finals 4 times in a row.
The Miami Heat, they're obviously a great franchise, an expansion franchise.
Right.
Late 80s, early 90s, I think it was
And for an expansion franchise, that's very successful, right?
For me, I wouldn't put them on there, but
you can't argue with their success.
They were great in the 90s with Tim Hardaway and
Right.
Alonzo Mourning. But there was a lot of great teams in the 90s.
Sure.
But, especially their real big success came in the 2000s When
Shaq and Dwayne Wade.
Shaq teamed up with Dwayne Wade to win him a ring.
Right.
And then, of course, LeBron James infamously announced he was going to South Beach, and they won a couple.
Yeah, they won 2.
I'm not counting for them, but I mean, they're good. I wouldn't put them on there, but whatever. All right, so another thing I thought was be really interesting. Basically, the way the podcast will be set up is we'll have our main topic of conversation, but there's a lot of interesting things that happen, basically every week in the NBA season. And this is just our hot topics corner where we'll go through, we'll give some brief opinions and just ramble on as much as we feel necessary, basically. So I think the first thing worth mentioning, this happened a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Time's getting away from me here, but Steve Nash retired. He actually retired at the beginning of the year, but for political reasons, for money reasons, basically, for helping the team or whatever you want to say. He didn't announce it until recently, and he's a great player in the league.
Yeah.
One of the all-time assist leaders, 2 MVPs, probably the only success Mike D'Antoni will ever have as a coach. So yeah, I mean, you just got to honor the great players, and Steve Nash did an amazing job in the NBA, especially. It always amazed me. NBA players do it all the time, but you take a guy of average height like Steve Nash, I mean, he dominates among the Giants, and it's just makes his teammates better. The shots he could make, wow.
Yeah, definitely. The Lakers were in that little rebuilding phase. I didn't like him very much since they would beat the Lakers in the playoffs all the time. Yeah, I mean, he's a great player. When he joined the Lakers, I was happy, and I really hoped that he would get an opportunity to win a championship with them. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But he's not just a great player and a good guy. He's a very smart player too.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of his ability comes not just from physically, but from being actually outthinking his opponents and being smart. That's pretty special.
He's a unique player. Mm-hmm. Most players get worse as they get older. I actually felt that Steve Nash got better as his career went on.
Sure.
And to be honest with you, for his style of play, even though he might have not been as known as the best defensive player, I felt I felt like he had another year in his tank, and I really wanted to see him go out playing for the contender.
Sure.
But that's the way the story goes. When they had Dwight Howard, Nash, Ron Artest, Pau Gasol, and Kobe, I mean, it wasn't a good season with injuries, but it's really disappointing. So much talent on one team, they didn't really get it done.
Right.
I mean, Steve Nash has had a great career, so he probably doesn't really have too much to complain about.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there are a lot of other great players who were never able to win the championship. I mean, right, one of them, of course, is Charles Barkley. I mean, Patrick Ewing is another. And there's a good list of them who were great and never got the ring. Nothing to be ashamed of.
Definitely. All right, so the next hot topic of interest is the MVP race. In my opinion, this is, as far as I can remember, this is probably the closest NBA MVP race I can ever remember.
Sure.
And there's a lot of great talent out there, LeBron James and Russell Westbrook, even though neither one of them will win it. It really comes down to James Harden and Stephen Curry. And, I mean, James Harden putting up career numbers, 51 points. But mind you, the Rockets are improving without Dwight Howard, so that's really impressive.
Sure.
Stephen Curry, I don't think I've ever seen a player in NBA history he can shoot spot-up threes, he can shoot threes off the dribble.
Right.
He's a video game machine.
Definitely.
The things he could do.
Also, the Warriors have a much better record than Houston, so I like both guys. Nothing against either one, but if I had to say who I would pick personally, I guess I'd go with Curry, just because his team is doing a lot better. Maybe individually, I mean, yeah, he's also a great scorer and a great player also. I don't know which player I would like more on my team. Both are you can't go wrong right now with either one, really. And we wouldn't have thought like 3 or 4 years ago when Harden was with Oklahoma City that he would be this good. Same with Curry. He was always pretty small and skinny, and you never would have think he'd be one of the best players in the NBA.
Yeah, it's really surprising because when James Harden came off the bench for the Oklahoma City Thunder, he was a good player, but I don't think anybody ever thought he'd be an MVP candidate. And Stephen Curry, he was good. You know, he's a good three-point shooter, but he's definitely elevated his game to another level. And I mean, as NBA fans, we just get the luxury of watching amazing basketball. And I really think that this is one of those MVP races that's going to go down to the final games of the season. I don't think when they do the voting, there's any clear-cut winner yet.
Right. Yeah, and I guess the only thing you could say to separate them out a little bit is the Golden State, as of now, they're the only team that has been able to win 60 games, and they only have, at this point, only 13 losses.
I actually saw the Pacers versus Rockets live last year, and Houston added a few different guys to give them a different look, but basically the Pacers shut down the Rockets, and Harden has really found a way to adapt. He leads the league getting to the free throw line, and that's what great players do. You know, there's more than one way to be great in the NBA. Not every player is going to be the most athletic or the most powerful, but, you know, James Harden was smart enough to find a way to adapt, and just Stephen Curry's playing out of his mind. I mean, the Golden State Warriors are just doing so well. It's a crazy season. All right, so this is more or less my topic that I picked, at least, but the Cavs run. Cleveland Cavaliers, phenomenal season.
Yeah, I mean, they've proved a lot because they had a pretty rough start in the beginning, and then LeBron had some injury issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that it's just so amazing. First off, credit to LeBron for going back to Cleveland. He's definitely a polarizing figure in sports. I wasn't a big fan that he went to Miami, honestly, but I became a fan when he went back to Cleveland because, especially when LeBron left, the team he was going to in Cleveland wasn't very good. They were bad. Kyrie Irving, some potential good draft choices, but they were a very bad team. And it's a completely different roster now, but just the journey this team has taken. They've had a rough start to the season. General management did a good job of making some key trades throughout the season. Bringing in Mozgov was by far the biggest, most important move. And he's a player that most people didn't even know, who he was. And then obviously J.R. Smith and Shumpert round out some of their big trades. But they've they've really come together. They're playing great team basketball. Everybody's getting looks. And, the big controversy, which always happens with great teams, but would be Kevin Love and his utilization on the team and how he's doing. But the reality is, statistically, Kevin Love's doing really well. And when you play for a great team, your numbers are going to take a hit. So
right.
It's just been a great run for the Cavs, and we'll talk about this kind of stuff later, but, they have a great chance of going to the finals this year. So anyway, we sort of touched on this a little bit, but just worth noting is Houston Rockets jumped to second place. They've been in the middle of the pack the majority of the season. Dwight Howard went down with injuries, and in the NBA, when those things happen, when you lose such a crucial part to your team, a lot of times the thought process is, well, they're not going to be as good. They're only going to get worse.
Right.
Well, Houston's gotten better.
Yeah.
So kudos to them.
Yeah, and everyone in the West, other than the 7 and 8 seed, are pretty close. And then, of course, Golden State, they're even if they lost, I think, all the other games the rest of the season, since there are only like 7 or 8 left, they would still be number 1. But yeah, everyone else is within a game or two of each other. But yeah, being able to, in this really tough Western Conference, climb up to the number 2 spot, for now at least, because their record as of now, they're 52-24, they're tied with Memphis. But yeah, to be able to be in that top 3 spot in the West is very good.
Exactly. This to me is hilarious. So there's not really too much to say with it, but I had to mention this. This is my dorky basketball side coming into play because it's probably not going to be funny to anybody else. But Paul George, he's coming back this week to the Pacers. And if you've been following the Indiana Pacers this year, Paul George has been injured all season. They traded Lance Stevenson because they thought he was sort of a disruption to the team or whatever, and they were relying on Paul George. And, of course, they trade Lance Stevenson. Then Paul George is injured, so they're not a good team anymore. But I don't know, man. You come back. I think they're a playoff team, aren't they?
They're right there.
So they're probably not going to make the playoffs. They might.
Well, they're only 1 or 2 games behind the number 8 seed.
Yeah.
So they have a shot unless they lose 2 or 3 in a row. But as long as depends on what the number 8 seed does.
I mean, why does he just wait till the last game of the season to come back?
I don't know. That one's all you. I don't.
The last thing worth mentioning around the league is the New York Knicks. Obviously, they're having a horrible season. They brought in Phil Jackson, whatever fancy title they gave him. He just does whatever he wants, basically. But, I mean, they're just horrible. And
at this point, they've only won 14 games.
Yeah, I mean...
They're the worst team in the East. And I think in the entire NBA. Let's see the Western. Yeah, they're the worst team in the NBA.
So they're the worst. They're the worst team in the NBA. Obviously, everybody in New York had a lot of hope when they got Phil Jackson. I'm sure he's got a strategy here, but he basically got rid of almost all of their good players except for Carmelo Anthony. And yeah.
Yeah, I think with the Knicks, he said he'll need a few years to get them into shape. So we'll see. I mean, I think to judge him fairly as whatever his role is, as GM or whatever he is exactly, I can't remember now either. He said he'll need a few years, and you have to give him more than just 1 or 2 seasons to get them into shape.
Yeah, I mean, the NBA is a professional level. It's like Hollywood. Everything you do gets scrutinized. Yeah. And when you're losing, everybody's on you. And Phil Jackson is one of the smartest minds in basketball. So I definitely trust him and trust his vision. But, I'm not really sure what he's trying to do, if he's going for the draft or if he's going to try to recruit a player. But
it's definitely possible. After the Lakers, when they had that super team, when they lost to Detroit back in 2004 in the finals, right? Yeah. Then Shaq left and all the other guys left. So it was basically just Kobe, and they did get Lamar Odom, but it took them 4 years. Then back in 2008, they were already championship contenders. They knocked off the Spurs, and they lost to the finals to Boston. But it took them 4 years to become title contenders. So it's possible. I mean, I think if he asks for 4 years, that's a reasonable timetable. Yeah. And obviously, the Lakers were able to do it. So I don't see. They probably weren't in as bad of a shape. They did have Kobe, had a great superstar, but I mean Carmelo Anthony he's not Kobe Bryant, but he's at least somewhere you can start, I guess. But yeah, if he asks for more than just 1 or 2 years, I think that's fair, as long as they keep making progress.
Exactly.
Because even those years, I think when the Lakers were bad, they were still playoff contenders. So there's still, I guess, there's a big difference still.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, it's just definitely been a rough season for the Knicks. We'll see what happens. And like I said, it's more an investment for the future. BD said it. And like BD said, it's more of an investment for the future. They weren't good when Phil Jackson got there. They were always underachieving team. As far as my opinions on the players on that team, we can go into that later. But yeah, my voice is down here. How do I end this? But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Knicks, and obviously they're underachieving.
Sure. So we'll come back and do another one. I think this time we wanted to do a big topic. We won't spend as much time on just one topic like we did this time with the top 10 franchise, but we wanted something that was interesting and
hopefully we tried
right, and that a lot of people would like to discuss, because I'm sure our list isn't not sure, but I mean I'm positive it's not perfect. there are more categories you can add. Some of the teams you could change the positioning. We weren't 100% happy with the positions, like we said earlier. We wanted some teams to be higher up, others to not even be included in there at all. But it'd be something interesting to discuss when we put this on YouTube, in the comments. And in the future, we'll, at least for now, we'll keep the main topic shorter, and we'll have more smaller topics. And we definitely want to get into discussing playoffs.
Definitely.
Who's going to win the West, who's going to win the East, and of course, who's going to win the championship, which is the main topic that we wanted to maybe discuss next time.
That's the game plan. So if you love NBA basketball, professional basketball, definitely stay tuned.
And playoff basketball is the best.
Playoff basketball is the best. We'll have a lot of great topics to talk about. And this was just our introductory podcast. So, there's going to be a little bit of rambling on and all that stuff. Well, anyway, I just want to say, on behalf of myself and, of course, BD, we definitely appreciate you guys tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and check us next time because there's going to be a lot of good stuff coming up.
Yeah, we'll try to do it in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, we're going to shoot for 2 weeks, and there's no definite time. But,
Right.
But so basically expect new content soon.